Hi, I'm Jim Knotts, President and CEO of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund. Welcome to today's virtual reading of the names. 2022 marks the 40th anniversary of the dedication of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in Washington, D.C. As part of our commemoration, we'll host an in-person reading of the names at the wall from November 7th through 10th, 2022, when all 58,281 names on the wall will be read aloud. In the lead up to that event, we'll be reading names each day online while sharing the photos of these heroes. For our daily virtual reading, the names of the service members will be read by month and day of death between the years 1956 and 1975 in alphabetical order for the given day. We apologize in advance for any mispronunciations. Know that our readers are doing their best to honor these service members. We hope you'll listen and watch each day and share with others as we remember and honor those who gave their lives during the Vietnam War.
Dennis Owen Akers, James Joseph Allen, John Michael Astley, William Herschel Ayers, Paul David Bacon, Fred Earl Bailey, Ronald Ray Baker, John Bomar Balatsaris, James Wesley Barber, Kenneth Lee Barnett, John Michael Bellamy, Rodney Royce Bernard, Felix Ramon Bacanegra, Roosevelt Jr. Braggs, Ronald Lee Brashears, Charles Henry Britton Jr., Scotty Ray Brodston, Robert Ballard Broughton, Gerald Bernard Brown, Patrick Bryan, Bruce Wayne Burks, Luther Burns, James Philip Burns, Douglas Pullman Butterfield, Edward A. Cabrera, Dana Robert Call, David Patrick Callahan, Thomas Darthan Campbell, Victor Joel Canales, Woodrow Franklin Carbaugh, John Harvey Carson, Andy Chapman Jr., Michael Lynn Chase, Lem Clark, Lonnie Leonard Cleve, Francis Leo Collins, Robert Emery Cook, Gary Allen Cox, James William Cox, Jimmy Wayne Crisp, Kevin Robert Crow, Jerry Michael Daly, Louis Frank Daly, Robert Sheldon Dankert, Danny Lee Dewey, Donald Jean Dissel Cohen, Michael Patrick Donlin, Dennis William Dotson, Johnny Lewis Dover Jr., Howard Maxwell Eakin Jr., Clifford Lyman Eaton, Jose Anibal Echevarria Jr., James Oliver Ellsworth, Jeffrey Evan Fesser, Charles Lawrence Flott, MacArthur Gaffney, Juan F. Garcia Figueroa, MacArthur G. Claude Marvin George, Billy Edwin Gibson, August Gonzalez Jr., Larry Dean Good, Calvin Thomas Core, Robert Martin Goslin,
Richard Tenney Gray, Sherman William Gregory, John Peter Guerin, Kurt Eric Hacker, Michael Dean Halford, Rory Timothy T. Heron, Patrick Allen Hartwell, James Peter Hassett, Jack Hatfield, Gaylord Blaine Hendrickson, Frederick John Henry, Stephen Wayne Herring, Carrie Eugene Hess, Merle Robert Higgins, Robert Hardy Hill Jr., Douglas Warren Hodge, James Fay Hollis, Richard Jerome Hallman, Thomas Glenn Horrell, John William Horan, Herbert David Horner, Vernon Fletcher Hovey III, David Terrell Howard, Elbert R. Hubschmidt, Jr., Kenneth P. Hutchinson, Jr., Michael Lewis Hudson, D. Reyes Ibanez, Rufus Liddell James, John Robert Jones, Edgar Dale Joy, Charles William Kane, David Richard Keller, Kenneth Edward Kidd, Edward Earl King, George Louis King, Jr., Joseph Klein, David Stanley Craner, Clyde David Lair, William Joseph Lammers, Robert Ebert Langston, Thomas Milton Layune, Donald Frederick Luthold, Donald James Lundequam, Joseph Walter Lyons, Larry Dwight Maggard, David Lyle Mann, Bruce Elwin Mansfield, James Arnold Martis, Jr., Antone Patrick Marks, Randy Lee Mast, John Robert Maxon, Thomas Leo McBride, Grady E. McBride III, Stephen Arthur Macaulay, Terry Russell McComb, Truman Joseph McManus, Ronald Harvey McNeese, David Allen Murose, Ronnie Allen Mendoza, Claudie Metcalf, Larry Lee Miller, Torrance Mitchell Jr., Davis Jr. Morgan, Thomas J. Morrissey Jr.,
William Ace Billy Morton, Terry Lee Mulkey, Walter Stephen Mullen, Lawrence Patrick Mulvey, Vincent Patrick Murphy Jr., James Howard Myers, Tony Valdez Nastor, Hugh Revis Nelson Jr., Joseph Paul Noel, Jerry Dean Olds, Eleazar Ortiz, Douglas Ralph Ott, Harold Leslie Parkin, Lawrence Edward Paulson, Kylus Therod Payne, Robert John Podnar, William Guy Poole III, Patrick Edward Papinga, Gerald Stephen Palista, Mac Lee Preston Jr., Nicholas Quinones Bora, James Wayne Ramage, Charles Marlin Ramsey, Everett Duell Ratliff, Charles A. Richardson, Lester Lee Roberts, Robert Louis Romero, Ralph S. Rousel Jr., Blaine Markwood Ruby, Arthur James Russell, Robert Preston Ruddle Jr., Hank Sally, Alexander P. Santiago Jr., Johnny Major Scott Jr., Alan Frank Scranton Jr., Anthony John Sestito, Robert Lee Shoemaker, Michael Wayne Simon, Stephen W. Sokowski Jr., Ronald Alex Staley, Stephen Russell Stefanski, David Allen Stokes, Hugh John Sullivan Jr., Dennis Lee Sutton, Grant Carl Taylor, William Carey Taylor, Dennis Lee Taylor, Ricardo Robert Tejana, Harry Lee Thurkoff, Paul Robert Tillman, Frank Tortorici, Archie Edward Trem, Brendan Xavier Turner, Norman Michael Tyrone, Hugo Hector Ulloa, Andrew Phil Brown Underwood, Darius Lee Udala, Joseph Valesco Jr., Eldon C. Van Bieber, Ephraim Vasquez, Richard Larry Vines, Richard Lonnie Venge, Dennis Richard Volk, Thomas Edward Walker, James Daniel Walker, William Wenton Webb, Norman Jean Welch, Charles Donald Went, Milford Homer Wenzel, Alfred Francis Wiggins Jr., Thomas Joseph Williams, Thomas Merton Willis, Charles J. Wisniewski Jr., Billy Herndon Wyatt,